And we're back with some more oxygen not included. And today we're going to be taking a little bit of a side meander. I made a request for people to submit some bases that ran entirely off 1 kilo of natural gas per second. The problem is I now have way too many of them and I've got to go through them all, and this is taking a while, so I just thought I'd show you some of the ones that we encountered. In fact, there's quite a few, but the rules are quite simple. Only input allowed is 1 kilo a second of methane, or, well, natural gas, whatever you want to call it. Starting temperature minus 194 C if you want, but hey, you can go around, play whatever way you like. Must support between 2 to 8 dupes, must have renewable suits, and that should be it. And by renewable suits, I mean, if you have an Atmosuit dock, everyone has to get their own dock and their own suit, and if it's an Atmosuit dock, they're going to need reed fiber, which they are currently harvesting, or if it's a rad suit, they're going to need glass, which requires, sand. And you have to get that all from that 1 kilo of methane per second. Now this is a 1 duplicate base. Now it meant to be supporting between 2 to 8, but I showed this one because it's the first one up and it's nice and compact. Now when you burn 1 kilo of methane per second, you actually end up with 750 grams of polluted water and 250 grams of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide here is being dumped into space. The polluted water goes down here and then, oh, you know what? Let's just follow it. Polluted water here gets picked up and it goes straight up here. Ignore pretty much all the piping until it gets over to right here. Now, when it gets to here, what happens is some of the water gets shunted across into these two. These liquid valves filter it down to 100 kilo packets. So there's, 100 gram packets. So there's 200 grams of polluted water getting dumped in here. It lands on this hot plate. This hot plate is heated up by this aquatuner. This aquatuner causes it to turn to steam. It kind of flows out here. And this temperature shift plate causes it to condense. It pops up there. There's a magical pop-up thing with airflow tiles when you do this. But anyway, that water flows down here. And that basically is a sand-free way of filtering all your polluted water into clean water, which is one of the first steps, because if you want to turn that into oxygen, you can't use polluted water for that. So anyway, this aquatuner here has a cooling loop passing through the water, so it cools down the water it heats up the water and cools it down simultaneously. A nice little touch. So what happens is all that, a bunch of that water gets, where is it? It's going to be pumped over here. Oh no, wait. Yes, down through here, and that goes down to these the toilets and sinks down there. And oxygen production is actually over here. Now, that would appear to be the overflow. So the overflow goes into oxygen production, which should happen any second now. Oh, they just used the toilets as well, and the toilets send all of their polluted water over here. This one's a little bit of an odd one. This is a chlorine room, and what happens here is the water goes in and then rotates through these tanks a bunch before some of it overflows out. Once there's too much water in here, a 10 kilo packet will get shunted up this direction and spit out of the system. But it does seem to take a while, and while it's waiting there, all the germs seem to just, get killed off. A nice little chlorine system. Oh, and did that water get pumped yet? Oh, there we go. So some water got pumped out of here. That water, some of it went to fill up the toilets and sinks. The rest got sent over to this section to get electrolyzed. So all of that excess water gets electrolyzed, and come on, and done. Then that gas gets pumped. The hydrogen gets dumped into space, it seems. There's a little filtration system here. All the hydrogen is shunted out and dumped into the void because you don't need it. I mean, you could put it into a hydrogen generator, but why? I mean, you have 8.5 kilowatts of power, 8.4 kilowatts of power being generated by your natural gas, so why bother wasting the space? You definitely don't need the power for a base this size. And then the oxygen gets sent over here. Some of it gets dumped at that gas vent, and that gas vent sort of pressurizes the base. In fact, it should be pressurizing more than just there. Oh god, that gets confusing. Some of it pressurizes the base, the rest of it comes down here and pressurizes the Atmosuit docks. Now, I'm going to have to talk a couple of points here. Sorry, Roskis, it's a beautiful base, it really is, but it only supports 1 duplicate, and it does what we needed 2. 2 is sort of the minimum. But, and one thing, this is my bad. I meant to say it should have been on the hardest difficulty settings, so you need to account for ravenous hunger, so the duplicates are going to eat twice as much food. This would require 6 of these hydroponic farm tiles doing bog buckets. That's not actually a big deal. There's still plenty of leftover water to support that. But by and large, I love this little base. Look how tiny and compact it is, and it's perfectly square, I mean, what's not to love? Anyway, thanks again to Roskis for this one. Next up, we got Asurea? I don't know if that's Asurea or EA, as in is the East. Never mind. Long story short, they sent over 2 bases, and they were like, you know what? I don't even need your natural gas. This base is just a completely self-sustainable base with no inputs. Well, actually, solar power. Runs on solar. Yeah. Anyway, you plant a whole bunch of wild oxyferns to do the oxygen conversion, and they just sit down here at the bottom of the base, converting everything nice and slowly and surely. Over here, you've got your Drecos. The Drecos provide both food and reed fiber. the food from the meat and the reed fiber from the actual ranching of them, or the shearing of them. And they're fed on bamboo leaves, which they can eat forever. This is one of those infinite food sources that just requires labor. And there you go. Supports 2 duplicants forever and ever and ever. Only downsides, no water for the sink. You got to remember, there's literally no water in this base anywhere. There's no water, no nothing, which means they can't run any sort of sink, which means food poisoning is pretty much a consistent fact of life. We'll check here, yeah, food poisoning, and you're going to be exposed to germs. No, you're going to eat right now. Are you covered in germs? Oh, probably not, now that I think about it. They'd have to touch this thing, the compost, or the toilets, or the outhouse, or any of that stuff. But yeah, interesting idea where it's like, yeah, no inputs, no outputs, we just... We're just going to run on infinite. This is one of those little tricks you can do in very late game if you want to do it. Oh, this base. Okay, how do I explain this one? Okay, this one confused me a little bit. This does consume the 1 kilo of natural gas per second, but then immediately the carbon dioxide is dumped into space, and the water, though, is boiled. So what happens here is this room is so hot that everything in here is boiling hot, which means all the polluted water that drops out, if we go to, say, liquids for a second, you can see little blobs of liquid exist for a split second and then immediately get boiled. Then that goes up here and the steam turbine eats it. In fact, it's just activating now, and it pumps the water up here. That water goes into an electrolyzer system, and the electrolyzer, that's what provides the oxygen to the base, and... wow, that piping. Okay. That piping hurts my brain. Alright, the oxygen then gets sent over to the Atmosuit docks. But there's another thing here. There's a whole bunch of wild-planted arbor trees. Now, I was expecting people to go the arbor tree route because there's a bunch of nice things you can do with this. But all of that stuff is collected up and dumped into the ethanol distilleries. And the ethanol distilleries will take in wood and they will produce polluted dirt and carbon dioxide. What's the pressure like in here? Oh my god, it's 487 kilos of carbon dioxide pressure in there. That is incredible. But all the ethanol is just dumped into space. Look at that. They're not even using the ethanol. Just dumped into the vacuum. But what is used is the polluted dirt. These things produce polluted dirt when they're working, 333.3 grams per second, and these three in total working flat out a kilo. So you're getting a kilo of polluted dirt. That is all shipped up here and given to the poke shells. It's actually stuck in a blob of visco gel to stop it off-gassing. And small ranch, there's only 3 critters in here, and there's actually 1 sage hatch up there to produce coal, it seems. But those poke shells, when you ranch them, every time they eat polluted dirt, half of it they poop out as sand. So this is one of the ways of getting your hands on filtration medium. This allows you to convert polluted water to clean water using a water sieve. So the trees produce polluted dirt, which is fed to poke shells to create sand, which is put into a water sieve to sieve your toilet water so that you can run your toilets and sinks, and the excess polluted water is dumped into a tumbleweed. Also, that sand gives you sand for the glass forge, which you can use to produce glass, which you can use to maintain your lead suits, because lead suits require 5 kilos of glass to get repaired every time they wear out. In the same way, Atmos suits require 1 unit of reed fiber every time they wear out. So this is just a nice way of getting all of that, and I'm thinking arbor trees are going to be very popular as we go along. Just they give so much to your build. For cooling for the entire base, there's just a steam turbine down here and just some supercoolant going around in a loop. Though the fun one here is the battery module from a rocket platform, because these things don't give off any heat and they don't actually have any power bleed as far as I'm aware. Meaning you can just, dump in enormous amounts of powers onto your grid, get it all stored up in this battery, which is actually quite small and compact. I think, can you do... Let me try something here. I think you can deconstruct the rocket platform. Let me see. Can you? Does that still work? Seems to be. Yeah, never mind. But yeah, this is another interesting take on doing it, where I do love that the ethanol, though, has just been dumped directly into space. Like, no, don't need the ethanol, we're just going to dump all of that. In fact, there's no need for that ethanol at all. You could burn that ethanol in a petroleum generator, and it would spit out water, polluted water, and more carbon dioxide if you wanted. But honestly, when you have 488 kilos per tile of carbon dioxide in here, they don't seem to be struggling for carbon dioxide. And water-wise, yeah, there is how much steam pressure in there? 136 kilos of steam pressure. They have all the water and carbon dioxide they're ever going to need for this base. I do like how nice and square it is. That is a beautiful little base. Thanks very much for that one, Asurea. Next up, we have this base from FerrybigGaming. And in the center, you've got your traditional 12 natural gas generators. And they've actually gone the route of, instead of pumping in natural gas, they're pumping in a kilo of methane at minus 172, heating it up with this liquid tepidizer, and then pumping the gas into the base. So, extra few steps. I like it. Alright, so this goes in here, powers these, and all the excess polluted water gets shunted down here. Now, the natural gas, or the carbon dioxide, that's just dumped into space, but all of the polluted water falls down here. Now, this is where it starts getting complicated. This base is complicated. If the water in here goes above 600 kilos, then this liquid pump turns on. And this polluted water goes... where is it going to go? Okay, it goes up here, and it can't go up this way. This is actually the toilet outputs. All the toilet outputs come down here and merge. So that water comes down here, if necessary, and then it comes across here, through this section, and all the way down to the bottom. And when it gets down to the bottom here, it's metered out to 1.5 kilos per second. And what happens is it just slides all the way along here. And when it gets to the end, it's sort of like a counterflow heat exchanger, but from water to steam. So the polluted water comes in, gets to the end, drops down, and you'll see it basically boils almost instantly here. It's been heated up by this aqua tuner over here, which provides the heat. And then all of the dirt, well, the steam flows back up this way, counterflows against the water, and then ends up as water down here at about 50 degrees. The heat here is generated by this aqua tuner, and, well, all the transformers and jumbo batteries, a whole bunch of heat sources are stuck in here, so that place is well toasty. Anyway, the water, there is one pipe that is constantly full. Where is it? Yeah, this one here. And this goes all the way back up here to... Come on, nope, keep going. Ah, yes. Goes up here and it fills through to all of the toilets and sinks and to the carbon sink. It also goes all the way up here and feeds into the electrolyzer system so that you can get oxygen into the base. And that's where all the clean water goes. However, excess clean water, as in when there's so much water down here it actually trips this sensor and it goes above 200 kilos, that excess water is, well, let's actually follow the sensor. That trips this over here, this little liquid shutoff. That's actually clamped onto the clean water line, and what that will do is it'll send the water along here and through to all of these bristle blossoms. And these bristle blossoms provide the food for the base, which is then cooked up over here. Now, I'm doing a bunch of math on this, and it turns out it's about 313 grams of water will provide oxygen and food for the duplicants, assuming ravenous hunger. So that means you can support 2 full duplicants on this, and they'll get as much, well, as much water and or as much food and oxygen as they need. As well as that, if you go down here, you'll see that this is producing dirt. Every time the water boils, the dirt gets picked up, and then that dirt goes on a little bit of a journey. Goes up here, through here, around there, and then gets shunted into here. This is actually sort of a counterflow. So this is cold, a little bit hotter, a little bit hotter, much hotter at 140, and then it goes in here. Where the moment it encounters this room, it turns immediately into sand. That sand forms sand blobs, which then need to be mined out. And then the mined out sand is shunted back through the counterflow, back through here, and gets dumped into this. Then it gets delivered into here to get turned into glass whenever the time comes. So, there you go. The sand makes the... That's the sand for replenishing the lead suits. Oh, and was there anything else we were missing here? Oh, yeah, this cooling loop just threw me for a loop for a while. So this generates heat, which provides the sand. This comes down here. This generates heat, which actually boils the water. And then this whole thing acts as a sort of a temperature control cooling loop. So imagine this is just sort of one giant battery of chill. So just say we need more chill in here because we want our oxygen supply to be colder. Then these doors can close and draw heat out of it, or chill out of it, sorry. Then it comes down here and it passes through this section. This is actually where it gets temperature regulated. If you're not careful, it actually gets too cold. So this actually brings it above 7 degrees so that it can be useful in all of these. Otherwise, it would freeze the water in the pipes. One last thing. There's gas piping here, but there's some sort of audio glitch. So every time I show the piping, there's sort of just this weird noise that makes it hard to see what's going on. But let me show you. See what I mean? I don't know what it is. I've checked all my graphics drivers. I've checked my motherboard. I don't know what it is. Just some sort of weird audio thing. But that's the base. I think it's actually quite a nice one, though. I think we could shrink this down substantially. Especially, we could nick the smaller water condenser from the other base and combine it with this. And as for the sand, I'm thinking, you know what? We'll worry about all of that later. Let's see what the next base has in store for us. This base is an interesting one. Unfortunately, there's no food prep included in this, so it's only the oxygen that's showing up. However, down here you'll see they've went with their own form of methane melting. So this is where all the natural gas is going to come from, and it comes in here and gets melted on this rotational rail. The heat for it actually comes from down here if necessary, and it also provides cooling for the main base. If this main base gets a little bit warm, those doors engage and dump chill from this section. This area's pretty chilly. It's minus 120 C in there, so, you know, not exactly a place you'd want to be hanging around for very long. And down here, this tepodizer makes sure that there's plenty of heat to keep everything melting as needs be. All of the polluted water from this system, well, it goes on a little bit of a roundabout journey, joins up at shower water, toilet water, carbon skimmer water, all of that stuff, and it gets dumped into this room to get boiled. You also get your dirt out. But the boiled water gets sent on another round trip all the way back over here and down to, where is it? Yeah, the oxygen production facility, which is right there. Now, this is using one of those overpressurization tricks. As in, this thing here tells it to turn on when it's below 400 kilos, and then this thing starts spitting out oxygen and hydrogen, and due to the gas mechanics, this is submerged in liquids, probably two different ones if I don't get my guess wrong. Yeah, naphtha here, water on top, only tiny amounts, less than 2 kilos in each, or actually I think the top one could be more, never mind. But that means that all of the oxygen and hydrogen spawns here, and since they can't spawn on the same tile, the hydrogen floats up, oxygen goes out to the side, and there you go, done and dusted. However, this entire place up here is now heavily pressurized in hydrogen. When it gets too pressurized, some of it's siphoned off and fed into hydrogen generators. But the whole thing works quite nicely, and I like the way they're using the cooling here. I have an idea already on how I'm going to use that, but I'm basically going to steal cooling from the methane to cool down my base. But that's not really what this save was about. This save was more about testing methane boilers, or methane sour gas freezers. This was, I think, one of my earlier designs, or a rough outline of it, and then they sort of changed it around a bit, and this is sort of the finalized design. 30 kilos of crude oil to sour gas freezer boiler thingy, which is, you know, a lot. Also, there's a built-in nuclear reactor. You probably missed that bit. This whole thing in here, that's a nuclear reactor build. That's what powers this whole thing. Nice. Fits in quite neatly. This down here is pretty much built similar to the one I've got going on, except it's, you know, a little bit chunkier. And by a little bit chunkier, I mean 12 aqua tuners in here, 3 per array, all of them providing masses of cooling over here. Hachooooo, of course, is very pleased with this. You can tell by his expression, he's just loving this stuff. And 30 kilos of crude oil get dumped in at the top. It flows down through here, gets turned into gas, and there's no actual heat control here. You'll notice all of this is just landing pretty much right on top of the aqua tuners. Thermium metal between them, and yep, just immediately flashes to sour gas, gets heat pumped all the way up here, and then they're using door compressors to just basically force the gas forward. Bunch of, this gets really confusing. There's a whole bunch of conveyor rails here holding diamond to transfer heat around the place to help draw heat into these steam turbines. Then at the same time, oh god, my eyes, there's this loop of nuclear waste that goes in here, and it goes through the heat exchanger, and it's rotating in and out. I don't know, siphoning out heat, maybe? It's really odd. It would explain why there's 12 turbines in here, and all of them are pretty much flat out, though. So yeah, that's why we sort of ended up here. Oh, and there's a massive counterflow here of sulfur. Yep. That's all sulfur. And what happens is, this stuff going around the outside, that's the methane. That's going upstairs to the top base. Yeah, this sulfur comes up here, gets to this point, and this stuff is a rotating loop. And unless this stuff goes below a certain temperature, it doesn't get let out. Just keeps rotating through here until it's cold enough to be released. So there seems to be a fair chunk of it, though it seems to be timed quite well. You know, that's the methane. Where is this? Ah, yes, the sulfur. Never mind, there's absolutely butt tons of sulfur down here. Anyway, did not mean to get sidetracked into doing a sour gas boiler, but yes, there was some interesting submissions for sour gas boilers. This one, I think, was a little bit late, namely because of the time and effort put in. This thing's a monster. Also very beautiful. I'll be including Isaac's save game file in the description, so if you want to go and have a look at this 3K sour gas boiler, just look for the Isaac name and you'll find it. Oh, and also, there's rad bolts. Here's the rad bolt generator. This is a sort of an all-in-one sucker where the rad bolts get sent out there, and there's even the nuclear waste storage, all built in. Just beautiful. Next up, we've got Ahmed, and they're running their base entirely off solid methane, as in there is a whole bunch of it coming down here. This is 1 kilo per second of solid methane. It's coming down at minus 217 C. I probably should have made sure I specified earlier the minus 194, but this is making a difference. They're melting even colder. Like, this stuff is really hard to melt normally. So this goes through here, nice big dense gas room, and it's up against an aquatuner just to make sure everything melts nice and neatly. Then that gas gets pumped over here and dumped into all of the natural gas generators. One thing you'll notice, though, is it's first rotated around the entire place in radiant pipes to make sure the place doesn't get too hot, using that cooling for, well, cooling. And once all of that's done, the polluted water that pops out comes down here, goes across, and gets filtered through this water sieve. Now, all of that gets dumped into oxygen machines. Oxygen machines, well, we've got this same submerged electrolyzer doing its job. And if we'll check here, yeah, you'll see there's actually 3 different liquids being used in that one, but same sort of result. All the hydrogen gets forced up top, all the oxygen gets forced out into the left, and this can overpressurize as much as you want. You have so much excess hydrogen and oxygen here, it's crazy. That gets pumped back through here and cooled down and sent over to oxygenate the base. But the food is where it's all kind of crazy. This here is just a whole bunch of wild planted sleet wheat. This isn't that hard to do. All you need is some pips and to make some natural tiles. Natural tiles can be made with copper ore. Well, pretty much any of the ores. In fact, you can even make it out of uranium ore if you want nowadays. Then we also have the pinch pepper plants over here. And this is all wild harvested. Now, this is designed for normal hunger. But each one of these rows and one row of these will provide enough pepper bread to keep one duplicate fully done. Oh, sorry, three pinch of pepper, 1 row of this. So this could theoretically support 6 duplicates. Now, as for sand, I'm not so sure about that one. That one seems a bit trickier. You see, they need sand for the water sieve, but they don't seem to have gotten any in a while. I think what's going on is all the excess food, that's why they have one extra row here, all the excess food would get turned into rot pile, and the rot pile would be fed to the poke shells, and the poke shells would then produce sand. I am not going through the math to figure out how much that would take. It would melt my brain. But yes, nice little compact base, though I'm not sure they could afford the sand requirements for the lead suits and the glass and all that. But, interesting. I'm definitely stealing some of the cooling, though. Before we go any further, let's get distracted slightly by one of the emails I was sent, and it's to do with how I set up my aquatuners. Turns out I've been doing it wrong this whole time. And normally what I would do is I would set up my aquatuner bypasses like this. I just have this bridge here so that if the water can't, or if the liquid coming through can't get through the aquatuner, it will just hop over to the other side and come over here. But if the aquatuner's on, it can pass through that way. Oh, 1 second, let's turn this off for the moment. Now, normally I start these up when they're off, and I let them run until the whole loop is filled. And then once the whole loop is filled, yeah, we've got max supercool. Oh, wait, no. Okay, there we go. We now have a full loop. I deconstruct that, and then what will happen is when we turn it on, it would all look fine, but you end up with this gap. Namely because this thing is actually holding one of those blobs of supercoolant inside it pretty much all the time, which is how you end up with these gaps in it, and your aquatuner will occasionally sputter like that, depending on how long your loops are. On longer loops, this is not really a big deal. On shorter ones, this can actually become quite annoying. And on high performance builds, this can be even more irritating. So instead of using that method, I was just advised, do this. Instead of having the extra kink over from the green output, have the green output going directly in and have the kink on the white input. And then what happens is when we fill this sucker up, throw that on like that and fill it up the exact same way. We've now got a full loop. We deconstruct that. We just turn this sucker on and no gaps. Absolutely 0 gaps. That's all I had to do. Move it 1 tile to the right and it just works. Yep. I've been doing it wrong for so long. Never mind. Yeah, and this is what distracts me when I'm doing these things. I keep getting mails or comments like this, and then I'll go off on a testing spree for 20 minutes and then forget whatever I was doing. Next up, we got Night Slash, and they've got their methane coming in from over here. This is actually a methane melter as well, 184 or so. Gets swirled around here, melted down, liquid tepidizer does the job. Comes down here, it's doing about 70 to 80 degrees, gets fed into all of the natural gas generators, and they're going with a hot base. As in, all of these are heated to over 140 degrees, it's boiling all the water, steam turbines extracted at the top. Now, how much they extract and how much they put back in really depends on how much they need. For example, a whole bunch of it here is getting metered into the oxygen supply. And this one sort of weirded me out a bit. When it comes to the oxygen supply, it actually has overflows. So if all of this fills up, the waste is dumped into space. That's how much oxygen they're able to produce. That's like having so much water that you're actually wasting so much of space. That's kind of insane. Oh, For sand, they've got dirt being produced by an ethanol distillery. That ethanol distillery produces polluted dirt. The polluted dirt, the trees are wild planted. So the polluted dirt then gets fed to poke shells, and the poke shells produce sand. The sand is fed to the water sieve. And any excess water gets fed to thimble reeds. The thimble reeds provide you with the reed fiber for the atmosuits, and yeah, they go down to the forge there. Where is it? Ah, yes, food. Food is provided by nothing but wild shovels. Kind of surprised it took this long for shovels to show up. They're one of the best infinite food sources that requires the least amount of effort. You can just starvation ranch them. You need regolith or dirt or something to feed them first. Actually, what's their diets again? All I remember is regolith is what I normally feed them. They can feed on regolith, dirt, and iron ore, which, yeah, I don't think anyone feeds them iron ore. But yes, regolith, more than likely you're going to feed them regolith until you get their numbers up to a population you want. And then even if they're starving, they'll still produce one egg before they before they run out of calories, meaning you can just ranch them forever. I should point out, this whole base is built on the base game, not the actual DLC. I had to deactivate the DLC to actually run this. And then the meat all gets shipped over here. So any meat gets left behind, gets dumped in here, and then barbecue. Barbecue, and even more barbecue. Up to 1.2 million tons of meat, or million calories of meat, and 500,000 calories of barbecue. Yeah, nice little compact base. Look at this little cooling loop going all the way around the outside. That is an enormous amount of petroleum. The whole place is just temperature controlled. You're sealed into a diamond cage of temperature controlledness. One fun thing here, the petroleum generator is left outside of this area because if you put it inside it, you'd have to deal with the carbon dioxide, and this would mess up the whole, extracting the water as steam. So instead, it's kept up here in this incredibly chill room, and I mean very chill. It is minus 44C in here, and then it's so cold in here that any of the polluted water gets turned into ice. Then the ice gets dumped onto a conveyor loader and just shipped back into the steam room to melt. Yep, there you go. Carbon dioxide occasionally gets shunted out and vented into the background of space. Alright, thanks again for that one, Night Slash. Next up, we got Lumpax and this beauty here. Now, the methane comes from over this section. It rotates around through here, gets melted, turns into gas, and then that gas is then fired into using these gas pumps and sent over to the natural gas generators. Now, these natural gas generators just burn it straight off, though you may notice the place is super chill. Yeah, there's reasons for that. Oh, okay, this is going to take a while to explain. But first up, the polluted water comes down here, and since this thing only produces 750 grams, this just basically gets pumped by this. This thing can handle a whole kilo, so a plastic liquid pump, it turns out, can handle it just fine. It gets dumped over here and boiled. So all of the water here is just getting boiled straight up, and they don't even harvest the dirt. The dirt's just left here. Any excess water that is not necessary is basically shunted out here, doesn't get sent back in, and instead gets sent across here and goes up to... Okay, let me try and explain this first. There is two crop areas here. Both of these are exuberant bristle blossoms, both of these are exuberant sleet wheat, and there's two wild planted wheezeworts. You see, because they're mutated, they need 250 rads. So those wheezeworts provide the necessary radiation to keep these four plants running. Now, they both require temperature regulation, and the water's coming out at 95C. So it goes through here, and there's actually metal tiles, some cooling sections down here, and it basically regulates the temperature of these two areas. So as the water comes up here, a little bit is siphoned off and sent around these loops, and a little bit over here is siphoned off and sent around this loop to keep both the sleet wheat and the bristle blossom growing the whole time. Any water that is not required for the plants is sent straight up here and goes past the toilets and sinks to keep them stocked up. And then it's sent over here to the electrolyzer to generate oxygen. And any excess water is just dumped. Yep, I am not joking you. The water's just dumped down here. This thing has been producing excess water for a while. Now, what I really like, though, is I was waiting for the use of mutated plants. I knew someone was going to get around to it. But I'd completely blanked on the wild planting wheezeworts. That's something I'm going to have to steal. Now, this does require dirt, though, and they're not recycling the dirt from here. So to get the dirt, wild-planted arbor tree and pips. Pips eat the branches directly off the tree, and they excrete 20 kilos of dirt per cycle. And that's reliable. As in, if they don't eat for 2 days and then they get to eat, they'll actually excrete 40 kilos. Well, from what I've tested, I'm going to have to do a whole bunch more testing to be sure. But from what I can see, you reliably get 20 kilos of dirt per pip. And these exuberant sleet wheat, they only take, I think it's 7.5 kilos per cycle. Yeah, 7.5 kilos. So one pip can keep both of these plants running. And remember, exuberant plants, they grow twice as fast, or sorry, 4 times as fast. So this basically, these mature in 4.5 cycles, meaning they're producing enough bristle blossoms and enough slate wheat to keep this entire colony running on berry sludge. Yep, this is a berry sludge colony. They're not even freezing the food because, well, it's berry sludge, it never goes off. It may have a few germs on it. I would probably replace that tile with a depleted uranium tile. The depleted uranium tile means that this berry sludge, the germs on it should now, yeah, you can see the germs are basically getting killed off. This should cut out any food poisoning, or definitely reduce it drastically. And the amount of radiation it gives off is pretty tiny. It's only, what, 5.5 rads? So even if they're standing right on top of it, they wouldn't gain enough rads in a cycle to actually inconvenience them. Now, a few other tricks that are going on here, though, is anytime they want to get down to this section where they actually handle the plants, they have to hop into atmosuits and come through in this transit tube system all the way down to here. Oh, that reminds me. Mop that up. And then they get to go on either side. And you'll notice it's vacuum sealed here because, well, there's 2 massive temperature differentials between those 2. And then, yeah, we got your beds up here, dining area, the whole 9 yards. Reed fiber is wild planted, and no one can even get in here. And because no one can get in here, the reed fiber just grows up, eventually matures, and falls off the vine, at which point it is picked up by the auto sweepers and sent over to one of multiple locations, probably over here. In fact, these wheat, the exuberant ones, and the exuberant bristle blossoms, they give off 4 kilos of polluted dirt, or rot pile, every time you harvest them. That's not even used. It's literally dumped outside the door. There's a conveyor thing bringing that all the way over here, and it's just dumped on the ground. There's 8 rot pile and about 145 kilos of polluted dirt, not even required by this build. Pretty sweet looking design and quite compact, though actually I haven't checked the numbers on the food. I think this is set up for regular hunger dupes, so this is support about 2.5 ravaging hunger dupes, but still, it's a beautiful little box. Oh, and over here there's the older one. You can actually see this is the save where I put in the melter down here, and they built this base on top of it, and then this is the more refined design. I quite like it. I'm definitely stealing the evaporating the water at some point, though that may be for some of the smaller bases. For the smaller base designs to only support 2 duplicates, something like this would be absolutely perfect. Next up we have Evan with one of the more brutally simplistic approaches I've seen. I love it. This the methane comes from here, it gets cycled around this section, it gets turned into natural gas, then the gas pumps pick it up, dump it into your 12 natural gas generators, polluted water collects at the bottom. Now, this is running at actually pretty chill temperatures because the natural gas is being let in, at its temperature of minus 60 something, so it's doing some cooling. But the water is what's interesting. Water comes over here, gets fed into this system where it gets boiled. And this is probably the dumbest smart system I've ever seen. The polluted water goes in here, and if it gets too cold in this section because of all the polluted water that's coming in, the AquaTuner activates, and it gets the temperature above 140 to boil the polluted water. And then, the thing is, it doesn't actually keep rotating. The supercoolant just stays where it is until it's needed, and then it rotates through here slowly. What happens is all that steam builds up, and then when it gets to 10 kilos of pressure in here, this door opens, lets a bit through, then seals it off again. And then the pipe down here exchanges a bit of heat with the steam, and causes the steam to condense down into water. And the water ends up in here at about 30C. And I've run this for a while. It seems to remain stable. This is the dumbest, smartest way I've ever seen it doing this. It's genius. Then the water gets pumped onto this loop. This loop actually goes all the way around the base and back around again. And the toilet water comes in here as well. So yeah, the water comes up here, goes through a little bit of temperature regulation. It needs to be regulated, but the temperature is actually coming from over here. So the natural gas heat is being used to temperature control the water so that it doesn't stifle the crops. And then the water gets primarily into all of these bristle blossoms, and these bristle blossoms are what provides the food. Then the water comes up here, goes through the oxygenation section, and also cools that down before eventually taking the long route back all the way around to come back around to here again and start its loop. Anytime there's a little bit of water missing, the water pump just keeps dumping more and more water onto the loop until it's full again. And I know what you're thinking. What? You've got 3 duplicants and you're using bristle blossoms. How do you possibly have enough water? Yes, that was my thought as well. I'm like, this makes absolutely no sense. So I actually had to do the math. I thought this was going to run out of water after a while. No, it turns out these duplicants, where are you? They all have deeper diver's lung. So it's not as cheaty as it seems. All 3 of them have deeper diver lungs, and then I did the math on how much the water it takes for these plants, let's say. For all of these plants, it takes 600 grams a second of water. But for the oxygen on top of that, it takes another, I think it's, I want to say 169 grams a second of water. But we're not producing enough water from here to actually feed both the plants and these duplicants, even with deeper divers lung, except for the toilets. Turns out the extra little bit of water you get from the toilets means this whole base consumes 778.5 grams of water a second. Or no, wait, sorry. It consumes 769 grams of water a second, but actually produces 778.5 grams of water a second, meaning it's producing 9.5 grams more of water per second than it needs. So a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of water more. This whole thing is barely holding it together. Now, there's no reed fiber for atmosuits, but, put in some wild-planted reed fiber and this place would work just fine. I just thought, yeah, that's sneaky. Now, one thing you could do if you wanted to just run 2 duplicants, you could basically rip out 1 row of bristle blossoms and then you could run 2 regular duplicants without the deeper diver's lung. That was mentioned in the email as well from Evan. So this can run 2 duplicants just fine, and 3 if you go with the deeper diver's lung approach. Quite small, compact, efficient. Love it. Next up, we've got Bruno here, and Bruno's base is actually remarkably similar to the last base in that it's 2 duplicants running on bristle blossoms, with just a few... Oh, actually, you'll have recognized the strategies here. First off, it's the natural gas that comes in. This has actually just been pumped in by a dev gas pump, so there's no... its cooling is not required. But it comes in here, and this whole place is a hot box, and the water is extracted via a steam turbine at the top. So that water, when it comes out, gets sent down here. If it's... a meter is actually used on this. It's meter to 742.5 grams per second. So a bunch of it is siphoned out. The rest of it is just left in there. And the bit that's siphoned out, it comes over here and it passes through all these plants. Now these plants are, well, they should stifle realistically, but we'll get back to that. They don't stifle, even though this stuff is coming in at 96C. And then the rest of that water comes down here. Oh, a bunch of it goes up here and gets fed into showers, sinks, toilets, and showers, sinks, toilets. And then it gets dumped in here into the reed fiber. So all the water from the toilets and showers and sinks goes into making reed fiber to make atmosuits. But the water that isn't required for that goes down here and gets fed into oxygen production over here, and the rest is dumped out to the side. Yes, this is a water-positive base, and it seems to be running just fine. Of course, how are these bristle blossoms not stifling? Well, they are actually stifling a tiny bit, but not often. What happens is there's a cooling loop down here full of supercoolant, and it keeps this stuff below its... rotates supercoolant through here, which keeps these plants chilled down so that they don't overheat. There's a little bit of water there to make sure it transfers the temperature enough. You see the water in there is actually pretty warm, but it's being eaten like a champ. Then that supercoolant comes all the way over here, goes around the base. It goes everywhere and then back down again to keep this entire liver quarters nice and cool, which is good because the water that comes down to the oxygen production is 98C, and the oxygen gas that's coming out is, 88 degrees, so they're dumping 88 degree oxygen into the base, but because of all the cooling loop going around, keeps the whole thing stable. And that's it. It's basically just the same as the last base in terms of crops and food, or crops and oxygen production. It's just a case of they boil the water directly in the natural gas room as opposed to having their own dedicated boiling system. It's amazing the variances people use in their designs, but they all come back to a few key components. Anyway, thanks again for that one, Bruno. So next up, we've got Russ. And Russ's base actually works the exact same as the last 2 in a way. It's bristle blossoms for food, and oxygen is just provided, and it just runs 2 duplicants. However, they are using 6 aquatuners here. This is... Okay. I just love how many different ways there are to do things in this game. All right. So, they've got one box up here. This is a hot box where all the water boils, and it gets turned into steam, and then it gets picked up by the steam turbines. But the steam turbines just dump it right back into the room. The water is not extracted by the steam turbines in any way, shape, or form. Instead, the steam is extracted by 2 gas pumps, which are actually hooked up to atmosensors. If the pressure goes above a certain height, these gas pumps turn on, and then what they do is they pump that gas over here into this room. And inside this room, there's actually supercoolant passing through from this aquatuner down here, and this aquatuner cools down the whole thing till the water hits about 20 degrees or so. So that means we end up with, this is what actually condenses the water into, or condenses the steam into water for use inside the base. Now, the water from here then gets sucked up by the liquid pump once it hits a certain pressure. Some of it gets shunted up into the oxygen production. The rest of it gets sent down here, sent through a second thermoregulation section down here. This section is actually cooled down by this aqua tuner over here, which cools down this section through a temperature shift plate and some mechanized airlocks. That sends the, that sends the water through here. That water gets temperature regulated and gets sent to the bathrooms and through to the crops, while simultaneously passing throughout the entire base, cooling it down, meaning that all the plants grow and your base is, a nice regulated, cool temperature. All well and good. This aquatuner over here cools down the steam turbines to stop them from overheating. This one's, cooling down the water and condensing it. This aquatuner over here, its only purpose, as far as I can tell, is to keep this room hot enough. So if the temperature in here dips so much that it's not boiling the polluted water, this aquatuner turns on. If it generates too much cold, this teppidizer generates some heat to counteract it. This one over here is what's cooling down this section, which actually chills the water, which feeds to the crops. It also chills down this section so that the oxygen that's passing through it is also temperature regulated. This aquatuner over here, this one sends out its supercoolant all through here and actually cools down this section here, which is where the food is stored. So this provides sub-zero temperatures to give the deep freeze to the gristleberry so that the bristleberry can't go off. And this final aquatuner over here provides cooling for these two natural gas generators, which are not inside the steam room. See, the ones in here, they're just going to be boiled automatically, but this here is specifically producing polluted water so that polluted water can be sent over here and fed into reed fiber, so that you can get reed fiber for the atmosuits, which was one of the things we needed to complete all the tasks, remember? So that's where that goes. But then the polluted water, any excess, gets sent all the way around the top, collects with the polluted water from the toilets and sinks, and sent back to the steam room where it gets boiled into clean water. So this is just basically taking polluted water and dumping it into reed fiber, and then any excess that is not required gets dumped back in here. Whew. And like I said, this is basically the exact same principles as the last two bases, just completely taken to a different level, and somehow is still really small, much smaller and compact than the last base. I love this game. Let's have a quick look at this one by Marc. This one here is actually built on the map I'm currently playing. They grabbed my save game file out from the last episode and they just chucked it together in the corner. Gotta respect the hustle. So down here, there's actually a methane melter pulling in 1 kilo of methane direct from the source, from Hachooooo themselves. Then this comes over here, gets melted. That gets turned into natural gas. Natural gas gets shunted in here, but they've already got, 5 of these running? Kind of insane. Also, as well as that, look at this visco gel down the bottom. So it's just coming down here, getting steamed up, and then we've got the 2 steam turbines on top. This aquatuner here cools down this metal plate. That's important later, but by and large, all the water in here gets steamed up. And then when the pressure in here gets high enough, steam turbines activate and the water gets sent across here. Some of the water will get redirected back in if the temperature in here gets too hot, but by and large, it just gets sent off this direction when the pressure requires it. And it goes over here, and some of it gets sent immediately to oxygen production. The rest of it gets sent down here into cooling. That aquatuner over there is providing it. It gets sent down here and cooled down to about 25, 26 degrees, and that's so it can be sent up into the base. And this is just the main base. Same thing again, bristle blossoms, very popular build, with 2 duplicants and some reed fiber at the end. So all the toilet water goes into the reed fiber over here, and the carbon dioxide gets skimmed, and the polluted water gets sent down here to get, destroyed, or boiled up again to get sent back into the system. And that's it. Toilet water goes into reed fiber, clean water goes into oxygen and bristle blossoms. I still have not seen any slicksters yet. I was really expecting slicksters to show up a lot more. Never mind, I'm running out of time, but let's see if we can't squeeze in 1 or 2 more. All right, this is the last bristle blossom one I'm going to do, but I have to do this one because this one's just tiny. Roskis basically updated their design over time. It kind of evolved a bit, and what we've got now is a sort of a combination of all the things we've seen before, just sort of compacted down as much as possible for a single duplicate base, though. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 6 natural gas generators in here. They all get boiled, and the water from that is actually sent down to get fed to the plants. This over here is where the polluted water is. That polluted water is actually just sent over to reed fiber. So this all goes to reed fiber. This all goes to producing food and oxygen. And then where is it? Okay, this cooling loop over here, this cooling loop actually goes throughout the entire base, and basically it just brute force cools everything. There is no messing about here. This just, yep, we're going to cool everything. In fact, there is 92-degree water getting fed to those bristle blossoms, and it's not like it's been metered out. It's like, no, we're just going to cram lots of hot water through there, and then we're going to eat the heat that leaks out by just rotating this cooling loop straight through it with, is that steel pipes? No, it's actually steel pipes. I was thinking, I would have went with thermium. It would have been all expensive about it. Now, oxygen as well. Does it really matter how hot it is when their base is basically designed this way? We've got, wow, okay, that's actually a beautiful gas duping. Anyway, Yeah, hydrogen is filtered out. That's dumped into space. In fact, it's even dumped into the carbon dioxide feed, so it kind of messes things up when it goes out. But hey, it's working, and all of that gets dumped into space. Even excess oxygen is dumped into space. There is no messing about here. This is the most compact bristle blossom design I've seen so far. Well, enough is enough. This is the design I came up with before I put out the challenge. I was hoping to, well, find something more compact in this design. I was kind of expecting a lot more people to go this route because I went maybe a little bit too large. All right, let's just start off here. This is the methane melter. All of the methane comes in here, kilo per second. Where is it? Yeah, comes in at a kilo per second, rotates through here. This tepidizer keeps the place warm enough that it always ends up evaporating and turning into gas. Now, the gas gets sent over here. It's minus 87 degrees, and that minus 87 degree gas is rotated through the food cooling chamber here. We've still got some leftover berry sludge in here. Whatever. But this basically keeps all your food cold because it's getting super chilled by the natural gas, and everything in here gets frozen and deep frozen. Then that rotates all the way around and comes back to our actual power brick. Then it goes through in radiant gas pipes to dump out the last of its chill. Like, it's coming in at minus 80, and then by the time it gets to the end, it's 24, 25 degrees. This keeps this area nice and cool, though not as cool as you would think. Now, the polluted water we'll come back to. What's more important now is the carbon dioxide. Instead of getting that carbon dioxide and venting it all into space, we send it down here and we feed it to slicksters. Now, you may be wondering how we're feeding this many slicksters. Well, yeah, let's just say with the amount of carbon dioxide this produces, you can run about 7.5 slicksters. And 3 slicksters will support 1 duplicate. Well, 3 and a bit. You need, let's just say 3 and round up a bit and you'll be fine. So this could actually support, just from the carbon dioxide from this alone, could support 2 duplicates. As long as you're willing to run 1 ranch of slicksters. Now, we did have to heat it up, so all the gas comes through a tepidizer down here because we're running a cold natural gas brick. But that's fine. Now, the water, however, that's interesting. Now, the water comes in over here, and some of it gets sent up, where is it? To this water sieve. And it gets sieved. We'll come back to the sand later. It gets sieved, and the clean water gets sent to the toilets and sinks. The rest of the clean water gets sent over here to the electrolyzer. Now, this is just a design I came up with pretty quick, so this only has 1 gas pump here. There should really be 2 if you want to run 8 duplicates on this base. But, yep, and then this whole thing, the hydrogen is burnt off by the hydrogen generator. We don't even vent it into space. We just let the hydrogen generator burn it off. But that provides the oxygen for our base, which comes back in here and gets sent into the suits and sent around to the rest of the base to oxygenate the place. And why did someone pee their suits? Dear Lord, what's going on? This base was running fine. You know what? It's fine. We're just here for the mechanics. This was one of those ones where I was just playing around to see how things would work. How on God's green earth are we supporting this many slicksters? Well, interesting thing about polluted water. If you get polluted water and you feed it to arbor trees, what you can do is we get 750 grams of polluted water. We feed it to arbor trees. We can support about 6 point something arbor trees. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I threw down 7 because we're not going to go with fractions here. So all the polluted water comes here, gets fed to them. They produce wood. The wood gets fed to the ethanol distilleries. The ethanol distilleries produce ethanol. The ethanol gets fed to the petroleum generator, and the petroleum generator spits out polluted water and carbon dioxide. Now, how much polluted water do you get back for the amount of water you put into the trees? Long story short, about 89%. So of the 750 grams of water we get out of our natural gas generators from the glory of Hachooooo, we get 89% of it back, or 673 grams, from the petroleum generator running on ethanol. However, that's not all. You see, when we ran it through the ethanol distilleries, we also got ourselves a bunch of polluted dirt. Now, that polluted dirt, we fed some of it to 2 composts. So the compost would produce dirt, which we could feed to the arbor trees, so that the arbor trees could grow. In fact, we got more than enough polluted dirt from 2 composts to run 7 arbor trees. We could have run more. The rest of the polluted dirt, that gets fed to poke shells. So we're running 4 poke shells here that produce us 280 kilos of sand per cycle. And why did someone drop a poke shell spawn outside? Guys, where is? Yeah, just wrangle them up and get them in there. So with 4 of them in there, we should be producing 270 kilos of sand per cycle. And to put that in perspective, with that much sand, we can feed it to our water sieve, and we can sieve about 1,400 kilos of water per cycle, or about 2.3 kilos of polluted water can be cleaned per second. That's how much sand we're producing. We don't need nearly that much. I don't even think we're producing that much polluted water. But yes, and that gives us as well as that, these things emit like a load. of carbon dioxide. 166.7 grams of carbon dioxide are emitted per second by each one of these. And we're able to run about 3.6 of these per cycle, or 3.6 of these are running flat out. So we're able to produce so much carbon dioxide that, in fact, even with 3 ranches maxed out, we've got 8 slicksters in each one of these. Even with all of these maxed out, we still have too much carbon dioxide. Like, look, we're having to vent a whole bunch. There's just loads of it getting dumped off into space because we can't actually consume it all fast enough. 3 ranches is not enough. We would need, how many slicksters? According to my numbers, we would need about 39 slicksters to consume all the carbon dioxide we're producing. So, yeah, that's a lot. As well as that, turns out poke shells can be put into a normal evolution chamber, and they just sort of speed up the evolution of slicksters. The moment the slicksters hatch, they don't even get a chance to evolve the natural way. Damn, it's pretty brutal. But that means we also get a bunch of lime, we also get a bunch of meat. All of this is going to just provide us with oodles of barbecue that we can cook up. And this over here is what you're wondering why we have 2 petroleum generators. Well, a second petroleum generator is for the petroleum we get from down here. All of these slicksters are turning all of the carbon dioxide they're consuming into petroleum. Ooh, let me check the numbers on that one. So if my numbers are accurate, these should produce, with 8, 16, 24 of them, they should produce 240 kilos of petroleum per cycle, which we can burn in the petroleum generator to give us about 90 kilos of water per cycle, or 150 grams of polluted water per cycle. So we've got so much polluted water coming in, and why are you 2 guys sleeping there? I really should check out more of the details on this base, but as you can see, you can run quite a lot, because you got to imagine that all the polluted water they're getting is either coming from, well, the slicksters that are turning it into petroleum that is then being, or actually wait, let's go back to the source. All of this is fed off the polluted water that gets fed to the trees, that gets turned into wood, that gets turned into ethanol, that gets turned into polluted water, that gets sieved and turned into oxygen, or the carbon dioxide that either comes from the natural gas directly, the ethanol that comes from the wood that comes from the water that comes from the natural gas, or it comes from the petroleum that comes from the slicksters, that comes from the CO2, that comes from the natural gas, or the ethanol distilleries, or the ethanol, or the petroleum generator itself. So, meaning all the food, all the oxygen comes from Hachooooo. And for the lead suit docks, well, we do have an awful lot of sand we're producing down here. We just have this little thing set up here. If there's less than 50 kilos of sand, or 50 kilos of glass on this plate, the glass forge activates, and the glass forge smelts out another 25 kilos of glass, which lands on this weight plate. And the temperature in there, we don't really care about it, so long as it's above, 60 or 70 degrees, and below 200, we're fine. So we can put as much glass as we want in there, meaning this can just keep working forever and ever and ever, as far as I'm aware. Though I do have to figure out why they're not using the bathrooms. Have I restricted some doors? They're all allowed in one direction and out the other. This whole base needs to be redesigned, to be honest. There wasn't enough space allocated, and I'd probably throw in an extra slickster ranch. We could run 4 of them and run 8 duplicates in this base just perfectly handy, all running off all of the methane we're coming in. So yeah, that would be for one of the larger bases. Probably our industrial hub would look something like this. Wait, forgot one thing. Yeah, there's a cooling loop going around the entire base. This is just super coolant, and yes, I know it's messy and it should be a much cleaner thing, but it goes through the gas cooling area, or the natural gas turbines, the petroleum generators, the entire living quarters, and all of this area down here. The reason that it goes through all those is it smears out the temperature, so the entire place is nice and cool. However, this generates more heat than the natural gas the natural gas cooling can combat, because this stuff's coming in at minus 86, but it's got to cool down the entire base. Doesn't quite work. So over here we have this detecting what temperature the supercoolant going through here is at, and if the supercoolant ever goes above 25 degrees, this door engages and we suck cooling out of this area. As in, the solid methane coming in, we dump that cooling into this room here. That cools down the supercoolant going through the pipes right adjacent to it, and the whole base gets cooled down again to operational temperatures. So we don't actually need a steam turbine anywhere to delete heat here. The whole thing is cooled by the methane, which I thought was just a nice little touch. Hachooooo provides for all. Now that we've gone through all of the designs, it's time to start implementing all those little bases everywhere. I think this colony here will probably not feed from Hachooooo. This will feed from probably this water vent over here. But all the rest of our colonies, all the rest of our planets, they're going to need to be fed directly off 1 kilo of methane. I mean, if you were living on this fire-only planet and you've got to handle this volcano down here, you're only living off the methane, and we're probably going to give you a very small base because there's not a lot of space to build here, or a lot of resources to build it from. Pretty much obsidian. Man, we're going to have to core out a whole area here. But say, yeah, small base here, just to take care of any problems it might have. And then for something more like, say, Ikiani over here, which is an industrial scale planet, this one would probably get something larger with a slickster style treatment, just so it can process all the variety of volcanoes that are hanging around on here. But that is all for the next episode. Sorry, there wasn't much progress on the actual base building, but it was just a case of going through all those designs. There's some really fun ideas I want to rip off. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and good luck.